Now, I want to start off by saying that this is probably going to be my last video on the topic of The Last Jedi for a while, though certainly not ever, because as a lot of you know who follow this channel, I've put plenty of videos out there expressing my views and opinions concerning this movie and trying to understand and analyze some of the decisions that were made with it. And for better or worse, it's time to move on and talk about some other aspects of Star Wars. So what I want to do here is really ask the question, why do some people hate this movie and why do some enjoy it? And why does there need to be a war amongst the fan base because of it? How can something we all agree that we love, that being Star Wars of course, create such a divide amongst those who actually love it? And to begin to answer that question, I think we have to take a look at a saying that you've likely heard before. No one hates Star Wars like Star Wars fans. But you know what? I don't believe that at all. Instead, I think it's the exact opposite. No one loves and cares about their franchise more, or feels more invested in it, emotionally and sometimes financially, than Star Wars fans. And hence, no fans are more vocal or adamant when it comes to expressing their opinions about it because it feels like it belongs to them, like they're a part of it. However, we fans obviously have widely varying opinions and don't always agree on what direction the movie should take or how the stories within them should go. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, because if we all just liked anything and everything they called Star Wars and nobody ever criticized or questioned what they did, it's likely Lucasfilm and Disney would eventually start to just get lazy and give us any old movie and call it Star Wars because they'll know we'll eat it up. That being said, there's rationally criticizing and critiquing a movie, then there's unbridled hate and anger towards one, or the people who created it. And even though people may have some very good, well thought out, and legitimate gripes and complaints about The Last Jedi, just irrationally attacking it and slinging hate and profanity at the movie itself and those responsible for making it is neither helping nor going to get your point across. You may have genuine fear and concern for the future of the franchise. You may be so disappointed with this movie that you really are done with Star Wars and want others to know why. But calling Rian Johnson an effing idiot who was ruining Star Wars and letting your argument start and end there isn't going to get you listened to or taken seriously. Instead, it's only going to exasperate the problem amongst the fans and get you ignored by the other side of the debate and anyone at Disney and Lucasfilm who may have their ear to the ground or their eyes on social media. And you know they do. They may not be acknowledging the backlash, but there is no way they haven't noticed it. And the same basically goes for anyone who refuses to believe there is nothing wrong with this movie and give it unconditional praise and say things along the lines of, it's such an intellectual masterpiece that most just can't understand it, or takes multiple viewings to begin to fully grasp. And when you consider the vast majority of people who will see this movie will only see it once or maybe twice at some point because they're not huge Star Wars fans and expected little more than a good story and a visual spectacle, you're not complimenting the movie by saying that. You're inadvertently acknowledging it's failed on some levels because a coherent, self-evident story that can be fully grasped the first time you watch it has taken a backseat to themes and messages that must be puzzled out and explained to you in YouTube videos by those who are only assuming Johnson put those themes in there in the first place, when they could just as easily be projecting and fitting them in there themselves in the hopes of fixing a flawed movie. And as much as I love Star Wars, I'm not sure these movies should ever be something akin to an intellectual masterpiece that needs someone to explain them to you or multiple viewings to begin to understand. There can be themes and underlying messages, sure, of course, but the story on the surface needs to be what makes the movie great. For example, has anyone ever had to explain The Empire Strikes Back to you? Have you ever needed to watch a YouTube video to understand why it's not only great, but widely regarded as the best Star Wars movie to date? No? Could that be because everything that movie tries to convey is so self-evident that it literally smacks you in the face the very first time you watch it, which in turn is maybe what makes it great? And look, Rian Johnson himself in the special features attached to The Last Jedi even said this of his movie, and I quote, "I wanted to do a little bit of a reset lesson, especially for kids who were coming to these movies for the first time. If this is true, and these are his own words, do you really think he wanted to make the movie so complex that even most intelligent adults wouldn't fully get it? And it makes sense that he would want to make a movie that kids can and would easily enjoy. Most Star Wars fans, I dare say, became fans when they were young. And as I've said before in other videos, it's not 1977 anymore. The competition for Star Wars these days is immense. Entertainment options for kids is nearly endless. And if Star Wars is going to survive long term, It has to capture the next generation. Okay, moving on. Another thing I frequently hear is that fan expectations or an overabundance of Rey and Snoke theories before the movie came out ruined the movie. That people had their hearts completely set on one thing, and got another. And for some, though I don't think it was really that many, that was probably the case. Leading up to the movie, I did read comments from people who gave the movie ultimatums such as, "If Rey isn't Luke's daughter, I'm done with Star Wars." And though I encourage these people to be open-minded and give whatever they came up with for Rey a chance, I'm sure there are some that just couldn't handle that this movie didn't go as they thought. But maybe the real problem is, it didn't go anything like anyone thought. In fact, an argument could be made, and some claim this is the reason why they liked the movie, that Johnson intentionally subverted expectations just to make a movie that was the opposite of what people expected, and not because he simply thought it'd be the best story to tell. And you might be thinking to yourself right now that it's not our job or place as fans to either decide what these stories should be or to overly critique them simply because they've gone in a direction we disagree with. We're the viewers or consumers, they're the creators and entertainers. It's one thing to take issue with a poorly made movie, it's another to say a movie is bad because it wasn't exactly what we wanted. Because had this movie been exactly what many thought it'd be, we'd likely be in the very same boat right now. Many would love it, and many would hate it. Which should begin to lead us to the inevitable conclusion here. There is no way to make a perfect Star Wars movie that all fans will love. Each and every Star Wars movie that comes out from now to the end of the franchise will have its haters and its staunch defenders. But why is it that The Last Jedi seems to have shattered and divided the fan base far more than Rogue One or The Force Awakens did, both of which certainly have people who loved and hated them? In my opinion, it comes down to two things. There are problems and inconsistencies with the plot itself. And I know some of you will completely and vehemently disagree with what I'm about to say, and I encourage you to do so in the comments below. But an objective argument can be made that this is not a well-crafted movie. And in other videos, I have gone over some of these reasons, so I won't be going over them all again. But you can either check out those videos, or for a full and complete breakdown of why I and others feel as they do about this movie, I would recommend a series of videos by a fellow YouTuber named Mauler, which many people recommended to me, and I recently watched. He essentially spends about 5 hours going through the entire movie, scene by scene, and breaking it all down. It might sound tedious and boring to you on the surface, but love or hate this movie, I recommend it and will include a link to it in the description below. The other reason I think a lot of people didn't care for this movie is it didn't feel like a Star Wars movie to them. And that may sound like a very weak argument, especially when you consider it's hard to articulate that feeling. It's hard to put into words what a Star Wars movie feels like. But it is one echoed by many fans. And though you may love this movie for being something completely different and new, and I will say that Star Wars must grow and change in some respects in order to stay relevant going forward and capture new fans, as I talked about before. But it just seemed like an odd time for a bit of a reset lesson, which is again what Johnson said. The Force Awakens got heavily criticized by some for being too much like the original trilogy, or trying to recapture that old magic. But in general, I think most people liked and appreciated the effort to make something that truly felt like Star Wars. The Last Jedi then came along and went in the opposite direction, and did something so completely different that it was jarring for a lot of people. And the crazy part is, this movie was essentially the back half of The Force Awakens. They're almost like two parts to the same movie when you keep in mind one picks up immediately where the other left off, yet they feel nothing like each other. And you can again respond by saying something along the lines that we are only the audience, and they are the artists, and should be given the freedom to create these stories and do with these characters and these settings as they please. In fact, this is an argument I commonly hear from people defending the different direction The Last Jedi took. That this was Rian Johnson's movie to make, his story to tell, and if you have a problem with that, you're not allowing him to be an artist. You're trying to take away his creative freedom by telling him how the movie should have gone. And whereas I can see that argument, and mostly agree with it, that he shouldn't just make the movie fans tell him to make, or it's going to be a giant mess of fan service, Johnson and those who defend his direction should still realize he doesn't have absolute creative freedom here. Not if we want this to feel coherent and like it belongs with the rest of Star Wars. This is a well-established universe and story created by someone else, and one that has also been further expanded upon by many others at this point. Simply put, Rian Johnson was not playing in his own sandbox, but rather in one George Lucas had originally created, and some feel that needed to be honored a bit more than what it was. And to continue to use this bad analogy, I can see how Johnson thought that simply reshaping the same sand wasn't going to be good enough with this movie, that he had to bring something new and different in, or people were going to say it's just the same old thing again. But at the same time, he has to understand why this movie he made, how different it was, angered so many people. And don't get me wrong, I don't mean to say Johnson intentionally made a movie to anger fans, but unless he's an idiot, he had to realize what was coming. And as I've said, I do understand changes need to come to Star Wars to not only keep it viable, but to hook a new generation. I fully believe that Johnson thought, or hoped, his movie would be a first step, and a welcome one, to a different type of Star Wars, a new era, if you will. And for some, it was indeed a welcomed one. There are a lot of people who love this movie, and despite disagreeing with them, I can see the reasons why they enjoyed it. And to be candid with you all for a moment, I love Star Wars. It always has been and always will be a big part of my life, no matter what the future holds. What Lucasfilm and Disney are doing with the franchise now does not and cannot diminish my love for the original trilogy, or even the prequels which, though not perfect, I still very much love and enjoy. And I'm not saying I hate everything they're doing now, or have no hope for the future. I'm not even saying I hate The Last Jedi. In my opinion, it was just not a very well-made movie, and your opinion could be the complete opposite, and that's 100% fine with me. It doesn't bother me that people like The Last Jedi. I'm actually kind of happy some do, because that's the kind of fan I am. I want people to enjoy these movies and the franchise, even when I take issue with an aspect of it. It would be beyond depressing right now if fans almost universally despised this movie. And I don't make these videos about The Last Jedi to corrupt people to the dark side and make them hate it. I make them to discuss Star Wars with anyone who wants to discuss it with me, the good and the bad. At the end of the day, that's why I do this on YouTube. I do it to talk some Star Wars, which is something we all love, even if we can't agree on exactly what it should be. Well, that's all I've got for this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think about this video, so leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.